Hey, welcome to this video. We are going to be taking a look at a Necromancer build that I am very likely going to be running when the game actually comes out. During the betas, I played Rogue, Sorceress, and Necromancer, and I thought I liked Rogue the most. Then I started playing Sorceress, and I thought I liked Sorceress the most. Then I started playing Necromancer, and I started to like Necromancer the most. So, really, I think this is a good sign. Every class that I've played so far seems more enjoyable than the last. And yeah, that's a really good sign for me. So I think this game's going to be tons of fun. And this build that we're looking at is not necessarily going to be, the best. I don't have the PhD in Diablo mechanics, but it is something that I started out playing the Necromancer doing just pure blood because I thought the idea of that was really cool. And I think that might end up becoming really, really powerful in the later levels where overpower maybe starts to become, you notice the big damage output bursts a little bit more. But in the beta where we were only going up to level 25, I noticed when I kind of started switching the skills around to go in more of a shadow, darkness kind of direction, everything just started melting way more, way faster. And let's run through this. So for the basic skill, you're going to get a lot of utility out of bone splinters. For me, I'm not really using this because it's a bone skill. I'm not using it for any real kind of synergy other than proccing vulnerability. You would think for a darkness and shadow kind of build, you would prefer one of these darkness skills. Maybe that's going to be more viable later on. Late game, maybe this 10% increased damage to enemies who are being decomposed really comes out to shine. But getting vulnerability, I found the way I was playing, there weren't a lot of other ways for me to get vulnerability. Bone Spear is one. But I'm kind of leaning towards just spamming this to keep my to regenerate essence. So you have like the way I was playing, I found myself stacking up attack speed. So my basic skills would be going even faster. I was casting this ridiculously fast. If I was low on essence, I wasn't low on essence for very long, and vulnerability was just always kind of up on these enemies. So then that brings us down to the core skills, and I'm going with Blight because the idea of this build I think is really fun to play. You have a bunch of, you have two really big AoE skills that are doing shadow damage. Blight is one, we'll see Corpse Explode is the other. And these are going to really help destroy everything on your screen at the same time because so much of the screen is going to be filled with AoE that as the monsters come in and enter the screen, they're already getting hurt. And so then with Blight, you also get this extra bonus for your minions doing more damage. And in Diablo4, the minions are no joke. Now that could change after level 25, when you get up into way higher difficulties. But coming from, I played Necromancer all the way back to Diablo2 Classic, and it was a real problem when you get into some of those big boss fights. You don't have any more corpses to spawn minions, and once your minions were dead, you're kind of out there on your own. So sometimes it was a struggle, but this is not the case in Diablo4, at least from what I've seen. There are lots of ways to buff your minions. There are ways to raise all your minions at once that we'll see a little bit later. So I think this is going to be a really viable kind of strategy to depend on your minions, and it's really fun. So over here in the kind of the core section, we also have some passives. This is just a kind of a no-brainer. You pump 1 point into this unliving energy just to get access to getting more core skill damage. So that speaks for itself. So now coming on down to Corpse Explode, even if they do nerf Blood Mist, and I fully expect them to, I would actually be a little bit disappointed if they didn't, because otherwise this is like the lobotomy build. You don't even have to think, you're just spamming Blood Mist and everything is getting carpet bombed on your screen. But Corpse Explosion, even without that overpowered Blood Mist mechanic, is really good. And to be honest, in the beta, I never actually used Corpse Explosion. I used Blood Mist, and it was just detonating all the corpses around me. But with Corpse Explosion, you'll actually be able to target the corpses that you want to explode. And this is going to be really good, even if they nerf that whole Blood Mist thing. Because for the build that I prefer, you go the Darkness route, and this turns Corpse Explode, instead of doing just an explosive damage right up front, just a one-time damage, turns it into a damage over time, and it's actually a pretty big radius. You know, this 15% bonus helps, but it's pretty big anyways, and I'm pretty sure it's stacking. Again, don't have the PhD in Diablo mechanics, but once the game comes out, I'll verify this. But if you're exploding all of these corpses and enemies are running in and they're getting this stacked, really, really powerful Corpse Explode shadow damage over time, they just begin to melt. And this little passive is really useful because sometimes you just want to keep doing damage and you don't necessarily want to switch over to proccing vulnerability with the tiny bone splinters, even though this is a really good basic skill. Sometimes you're just in the fight, you want to get that essence back up. This, consuming a corpse generates 9 essence. That's pretty insane if you're, casting blight on things, getting that AoE damage, getting that minion damage. Then you're also running lower on essence, so you start exploding corpses, and then your essence just goes up just because you're using corpses. So this is really useful. And with the Blood Mist thing, if that's still capable of detonating corpses, you basically instantly, your essence goes back up to full. So then we have this dealing more damage every time you consume a corpse. That's just free damage because you're always going to be popping corpses off. All right, coming down here to the curses area. I played around with curses a little bit. Hopefully they get a buff because I didn't feel compelled really to use them. But we'll see. I used Decrepify a little bit. It was useful for slowing things. But since I'm using Blight, and Blight slows enemies already, I already get that debuff that helps me out a little bit further down. We'll see. So I don't really need Decrepify. Okay, but these passives I am going to put in here. So again, the minions, really fun. Skeletal mages, if you go the bone route, they hurt themselves to do even more damage. And then if they're alive for like 5 seconds, they'll do 40% more damage. So buffing their life and their damage, it's just going to be a good way to have this constant source of damage, even if you're running around, dodging, boss mechanics or whatever. You have this kind of artillery behind you that's always slinging, doing damage. So also you do more damage to distant enemies. Just for the play style I prefer, this makes sense because I'm always going to have some kind of distance between me and them. Okay, coming down, we see this when a corpse is formed. You're going to get a little bit of Fortify. Just the real brief intro to Fortify. Let's say you have 100% of your health, and you're getting fortified, and your Fortify goes all the way up to 100% as well. If your health were to drop below the level of Fortify that you have, so let's say you have 100% Fortify and you have 98% of your health, then you're going to become fortified, and that means you're going to take 10% reduced damage. So this is nice just because it's going to make you a little bit tankier, and sometimes you have various things that proc, like you do more damage when you're healthy, that kind of stuff. But being a little bit more tanky, in the beta, level 25 didn't really matter. Nothing was really touching you as a Necromancer, except the Butcher. The Butcher annihilated me every time I encountered him. But the main content, your health bar really didn't move that much. But in later difficulties, yeah, you probably want that tankiness. But since this is a darkness kind of shadow build, these passives for shadow, I'm just going to take all of them. So getting extra movement speed. Oh my god, the Necromancer, dude, he is so slow. Like, he had no sense of urgency. This guy is just taking his sweet time. Just got out of the all-you-can-eat buffet in a food coma. Like, he is just not in a hurry. So let's get that movement speed up with that passive. And then having a chance to stun, this is pretty useful because I'm going to be doing more damage to enemies that are stunned if I take this passive down here. So not usually a huge fan of the lucky hit because it's just a chance to do something. You know, if you had a 10% lucky hit proc on a 10% lucky hit chance on a skill, and then your lucky hit says you have a 15% chance to stun, overall you have a 1.5% chance to do whatever this thing is saying. So keep that in mind. You know, lucky hit is sometimes not as good as it appears to be, but we'll see as the game comes out and we play through it. Maybe it can be really, really good, especially if you stack your lucky hit. Then, yeah, down here, just getting damage bonuses to enemies that are slowed. So that's coming, in my case, from Blight. So any enemy that's impacted by Blight, and if I happen to stun an enemy, then I'm doing 18% increased damage to them. And over here, this stacks up to 3 times, this 6% damage increase. And it's not just a damage increase for me, it's also for my minions. And then this is where I kind of am going to have to play around. Do I want to use the Shadow Mage option for your skeletal mages that do like medium damage? Or do you want to go the bone route where it does more damage? So we'll have to see here because if this is only increased shadow damage, then it makes sense to get that 18% stack. Once the 6% stacks 3 times, get that 18% extra damage out of the shadow mages, perhaps. But we'll see. So then down here, we have this Army of the Dead skill. And Army of the Dead is just going to allow us to, for a little bit of time, get these skeletons that are running in and exploding on enemies. That's pretty cool. But really what this is all about is being able to instantly raise your skeletal warriors and your mages. So let's say you're in a boss fight and you're having trouble killing the boss, which in the beta you don't have trouble killing the boss as a Necromancer. But let's say higher level content, you're having some trouble killing the boss. All of your skeletal warriors and mages have been knocked out, and you don't want to use the corpses to spawn the skeletons. You want to use it for corpse explode. You know, in my case, getting this area of effect, damage over time. You want as much of that hitting the boss as possible. Well, then you just pop Army of the Dead, and all of your skeletons spawn. Okay, so then you have some passives here. For those more long-lived fights where you're in more difficult content, it might be nice to heal the skeletons. So this skeletal priest, you know, if you activate the same button that raises your skeletons, but you have max skeletons, then the skeletal priest apparently can heal your skeletons. I didn't play around with this much in the beta, but since I'm planning on going that, you know, trying to buff my skeletal mages, maybe have them doing the bone variety where they're hurting themselves to do damage to the enemies, well then if I heal them, they'll stay alive longer. So more damage overall. This is also useful. It just means that the bosses aren't going to be one-shotting your skellies. So if you can only take 25% damage per hit from a boss, then your skeletons can actually take quite a few of those big hits before they go down, especially when paired with healing them periodically. So then, of course, if I've been healthy for at least 4 seconds, so this is where that Fortify is coming in handy, maybe, making me a little bit more tanky, more likely to stay healthy. Then I get more attack speed, so do the minions. And, of course, minions doing more damage when you're close to them. So, you know, maybe I go over, hang out with the skeletal mages that are staying at a distance away from the enemies, and we're just having the spellcaster party over here slinging stuff at the enemies. Sounds like a good time. 30% increased damage. I like to see it. So, okay, then finally, Shadow Blight. This is just the capstone passive that you're going to go with if you're primarily focused on doing shadow damage. Basically, you do more shadow damage to enemies, and then every once in a while you do even more shadow damage to enemies. And yeah, that's pretty much the rundown. So this one is just a fun build based on what I enjoyed playing. That's going to be all about doing pretty massive shadow damage to enemies, along with setting up my minions to do the rest of the damage. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and it's scratching that itch that you have. If you have the same one that I have, waiting for Diablo 4 to come out, then we'll just be nerding out on this kind of stuff together, planning these characters we're going to make until the game is finally here. So till then, see you in the game.